Welcome to Woman Talk, where we keep it real. My name is Tara. Please join me and my girls Dee and Promesta as we have difficult and informative conversations. Our goal is to uplift and encourage you. Please go with us on this journey. Welcome to Woman Talk, where we keep it real. Today's conversation is going to be a little more serious than I think we're serious all the time, but this is a serious topic because it's become an epidemic around this country. And I don't know if it's anything that's new, but I think that people are talking more about experiences that they've had, especially in childhood. And we're talking about child abuse and neglect, and that includes sexual abuse, physical abuse,
emotional abuse.
Emotional abuse, exactly.
I want to start off by giving the definition of abuse. You can read along with me on the screen right now. A pattern of behavior used by one person to gain and maintain power and control over another. So keywords are power and control. This is what people commonly think of when they hear the word abuse, and that's physical abuse. This is someone using hitting, punching, kicking, slapping as a means to assert control over somebody. Invading their personal space physically is also a form of abuse. Number 2 is sexual. Sex can be rape, which is a form of abuse, but also criticizing someone about sex, making them feel bad about themselves so that you can control them. Sex, even within a relationship, can still be rape. It can still be something that you still can say no to and use as an abuse. Number 3 is verbal/emotional abuse. Words can hurt. Words can do a lot of damage. Actually, emotional wounds take a lot longer to heal than physical wounds. Number 4 is mental or psychological abuse. Now, that's where the person, the partner, is using mental tricks or psychological tricks to make the person doubt their own sanity. Number 5 is financial and economic abuse, or withholding money can definitely be a means of asserting power and control. This is what the abuser uses. Number 6, that's cultural identity. When someone is abusing someone culturally based on their identity.
And neglect, which really means that there were times in your life when you just weren't taken care of, and it could be in different ways. So this came about, the thought, because I have written a book, excuse me, which I've been not hesitant, but it's in the final stages. And I allude to abuse that I experienced as a child, but I didn't go into any specifics about the abuse itself or about how it affected me and continues to affect me in my adult life. And I know that there are going to be religious people who say, well, if you're a Christian, things shouldn't be affecting you. Well, that's just misinformation that gets put out there, where we have to work, especially, the body and the spirit are separate if we're going into a spiritual conversation. And the body, once it's affected, it continues to be affected. And you have to work and work and work and when I say body also, I'm talking about the mind part also, that we have to continually work to overcome some of these things. And now being older, you come up with circumstances and situations where you just say enough is enough. And I think that kind of is where I am. And so where before, because initially when I started writing my book, now it's been about 13 years ago, there are so many circumstances that have come up. And at this point in my life, I just feel like for maximum benefit, that some of those things also should be discussed. And so I never have hidden the fact that I had what I consider to be a horrible childhood. I was neglected, of course, that goes without saying. And for people who know my family, because we kept things so quiet within our family, these were things that just were not known. I was physically abused, I was sexually abused. And through these processes, it's like just even opening up to the fact that happened. And everybody's recollection is different. They have the right to theirs, I have the right to mine, and I have the right to share my story how I want to. Because I even was fearful when I initially wrote the book. I told nobody in my family, nobody. They found out because a friend of mine posted a picture from my initial book signing, and none of my family knew until they saw that picture. So I guess that's just opening it up. Before we get into anything else, I mean, Promise, DeAndre, you guys have anything you want to add?
I think for me, more so, I think on the physical side, because that's how I suffer, is physical abuse. So on the physical side, it plays over, and I didn't realize that into your adult life until I had some other things that went on in my life that we'll discuss. And when that happened, I went to therapy, and they were like, tell me about your childhood. I told them, and then they told me how that played a part in my reaction, what was going on then. So, I mean, I just think it's very important. You're never having these discussions to hurt family members or to hurt other people or make them feel bad, but it's your truth. And to me, holding on to that your story, or like we said, suffer in silence. When we do things like that, I think we're not helping others. And if we want to help others, I think we need to talk more. It's very difficult. I'm a very private person. It is very difficult to talk about things that you've been through when you believe you have healed and forgiven, especially when you've forgiven though, and you're not trying to make the other person relive it. But it's not about hurting them. It's not about hurting or shaming anyone. It's about healing for yourself, because I believe it's healing to even discuss it, even if it's a hard topic. But it's healing for others that are going through it, that maybe you can tell them how you were able to get through it, or how you were able to forgive, or just your story. So that's why for me, this is very important, difficult, but important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I since you guys have touched base on that, I will touch base on the sexual abuse part, and how, as you grow older and you become, you get married and you're intimate with your spouse, and how that can affect the intimacy. If you're touched a certain way, or they do something a certain way, and the triggers that happen, or it takes you back, or that PTSD comes into play. Definitely how to heal from that, so that you don't bring that into the intimacy with your spouse, because then at that point they feel rejected. They sense that you're withdrawing from them, and the intimacy within that. And it could even be if they hug you a certain way, or kiss you in a certain spot, or kiss you on the back of your neck, or something like that brings back the way that a person could have been sexually abused as a child, and how that can come into play if you don't get counseling, or there isn't healing. So it's very important to definitely heal from that, and not bring it into your adult relationships.
And just to Promessa, you just said something that made me think about something. One of my family members that was sexually abused as a child, I remember another family member like maybe patted her on the back or something, and she had a flashback from as a child when she was touched like that. And because she was so young, I believe like her memory was kind of confused about exactly who had done it. And so she accused a person of doing it that didn't do it, because they had not been around like that. So, but it was that touch. And so I was trying to tell her, instead of getting upset because this person told something that may not have been true, it was that person's reality, that it was a flashback. It wasn't on purpose. It wasn't malicious. So sometimes we really have to think about that and take that in consideration before we judge people, or get upset with them. And that was one of the things that I was glad that that I took the time to think about. Maybe it wasn't about the fact that he really did it. It was the fact that that touch reminded her of her childhood.
All right, I remember because I was interested so much in the treatment of trauma that I took a class when I was getting my master's degree called Sexual Abuse Treatment and Recovery. And it was almost like being inundated with information. And I didn't know that the whole process of the class triggered me. So we would watch these videos of people telling their story. And then there was something that came up in one of our lectures that said, because it's like your body has awareness. So, and I think I put in my book that I didn't have a lot of specific memories of the sexual abuse, but I've always been very sexually aware, even as a small child. And so I didn't have any specific memories. And in learning that, what our professor said was that if you don't have specific memories, typically the sexual abuse that you experienced was pre-verbal. And that just knocked me off I was like, oh my gosh, that means that these things were going on before I could even talk. And, you think over timelines, and I was like, this is really the truth, because I went to live with my grandmother when I was 6 years old. So all of these things happened prior to me going to live with her. And it was like, this is crazy. And so it kind of sent me into a whirlwind. I could not complete the class. I had to take it incomplete and take it over. It was just so much that happened in that kind of that awareness. And then I would think back into because you would get these like flashes of memory, not real full memories, but flashes of memories. I know very clearly who my abuser is. I know who that person is, but because I got the flashes of the recollection, and then in confronting that person, their reaction was over the top. So then it was like, okay, this is something that I just have got to really deal with through myself, through healing. But it's there, it exists. And the fact, like what happens in your life, there were things that people, and this is real raw, y'all, so I'm just gonna be honest, but there are things like, you think you're losing your virginity, but there's no pain and no blood. Why not? All these kinds of things. So these are just things that happen and think about. And it's just like, wow, this really, and not having, so the neglect piece comes in because nobody talked to me about stuff. So I didn't know the difference until I was well into my adulthood, and how different things show up. It was more like the anger that you feel. It was like, I will fight you because no one's going to take advantage of me, but I don't know where that anger was coming from, And then the neglect, there's something that I say when I'm in treatment with people all the time, because we take for granted that people should just know things. And I say things like, it's crude, but we wouldn't even know how to wipe our behinds if someone didn't teach us. And I was the child that nobody taught that to. It was just like feeling forgotten or overlooked. That's where the neglect piece comes in, because they don't know. They didn't really have that much contact with you till you were 6 years old. Well, by that time, these are things you should know. But if no one was present to teach you that, you wouldn't know. And then the neglect comes in that there's no recognition. You got body odor. Why do you stink? Well, hell, ain't nobody taught me how to wash. So these are the things, and how these things showed up in my life. And a lot of times, like I said, we're so reluctant to talk about these things, but it's needed. Again, this is no longer girl talk. This is woman talk. And I know I'm not the only one who's 50, who's gone through these things. And like I said, the concept of my book, and I teach people about not smelling like smoke, which it comes from the three Hebrew boys who were thrown in the furnace, scriptures in the Bible. because it was my job at that point. I didn't have anybody to teach me, but the Holy Spirit and God, how do I show up in my life and not smell like what I've been through? That was important to me. And that's what I teach people, you know. So, you know, it's so important that we talk about these things. And I know a lot of this, I've never had some of these conversations with my family members because it gets to the point where it's like, I'm not going to debate with you what I've gone through. I live it every day, you know? So I don't have to prove anything to you. I don't have to show anything to you. I don't have to do any of that because it's enough that I got to overcome it every day.
Tara, what was interesting, I remember that's one thing I love about our friendship is that we take the time sometimes to learn things. Like some of us take things for granted. I remember because you love your birthday. You just love your birthday. And I remember one time saying to you, girl, because you were in January, you telling us about your birthday in June. I'm like, can I have my birthday in February, please? And I remember one day saying to you, you're acting like you've never had a birthday party before when you was little. And you were like, I didn't. And that just was like, what? Like, so it's like we take for granted that we don't know all of these different walks in life. So then I understood why you were so excited about your birthday. So I would laugh because here it comes. But I wasn't so much like, good gracious, like, don't send it in January. We was giving you restrictions. But
you got to wait till after her birthday, at least.
It made me understand that, okay, you didn't have birthday parties as a child. So nobody took the time to throw you a party as a child. So therefore, now as an adult, how much it meant to you. So, so that is like, one of the reasons, it just shows the reason actually that we're all doing this is because that we all have talked to each other and figured out why we are the way we are. We've had those conversations. So yes, that's just interesting. And that's really deep, everything that you were saying.
I think along with that is how we always say you don't have to suffer in silence. And I know growing up, I did that. I suffered in silence. And so for those of you listening, that's one of the biggest things that we share. And we want to really, send this message out to you. You don't have to suffer in silence. I remember for many, many years, because of the sexual abuse in my childhood, when I was married, it felt dirty, that I could be, having pleasure and intimacy, with my spouse. And afterwards, I felt dirty. I felt filthy. I felt it was wrong, and there wasn't, it wasn't about taking a shower type of thing. It was something so deep and something just internal that I found pleasure in the intimacy with my spouse. And once I, went through that healing process and all of the journey along, even my walk with God, the things that I had to go through, the sifting of just releasing all the toxic mentality really is when you're finally able to heal and enjoy the intimacy, with your spouse and enjoy, the touch or the hugs or the kisses, or really just the fulfillment that you can give one another is something that you really, really shouldn't feel dirty about. It's beautiful. It's to enjoy one another and there's beauty in it. But when things like this happen, it gets tainted and it's distorted, not only in your physical body, but in your mind. I know certain things would happen in the bed and I would remember, certain things. And so I would kind of like stop and that's kind of not fair to the other person. Like we're in the middle of something, like, okay, don't then they get left hanging. And, it's just something that as we go through working out the things that happened to us in our childhood, to know that intimacy and being sexual beings is beautiful, you know, not to feel dirty. And if you do, then like we say, you don't have to suffer in silence. Get some counseling, go to a therapist, things like that. If you are a believer, prayer, or speak to your pastors, see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whatever it is that you feel that you need, but get through it, heal, go through that healing process, allow yourself to do that, because they still have power over you. That situation of the things that happen to you, then they still have so much power over you, and you're not allowing yourself to live and enjoy the beauty in it.
Mm-hmm. It's a quality of life issue. And then just understanding your triggers. That's so important. Mm-hmm. For many, many years, a trigger for me was the word pretty, because the person who abused me would always talked about how pretty I was. And so for me, my brain became more important. So first time you tell me I'm pretty, more than likely, we're not going to have, much more to talk about. I wanted people to respect my mind. So I became very defensive in my work. You all know how I was at the place that we worked. And it was important for me to be very good at what I did.
And respected.
And respected. If I felt like you were disrespecting me, and I always would look, it had nothing to do with, how you look. Being able to be good at my job and what I was doing, that was very, very important to me. I mean, it's still important to me to this day, more so than any of that other stuff. That didn't mean anything, the appearance of it, that didn't mean anything. What I did was to bring my professional persona forward. And it took me a long time to have those other things be important to me again. We were on a call last night, and I wasn't joking, I was serious, because I was looking at myself in the camera. I said, man, I am just loving how my hair looks. It's just like being able to go into the focus of me and my physical being, and be okay with who I am, and not to have that be challenged in any way. I was always very defensive about people thinking that maybe I didn't know my stuff, or, that kind of thing. So it again, when I say it shows up in very different ways, it shows up in very different ways, but you've got to really learn yourself to know how to start to combat those things.
And another thing with that is that when you have a mate, is that, a lot of times your mate doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
Mine is raised voices. Raise your voice. Anything else you're saying, I'm not listening. There's not, it's done. It's done, because I don't do raised voices. Raised voices, I shut completely down. It's over. Even though, which my kids, they'll be like, you talk loud, because I talk loud when I get excited.
I was gonna say that, but
I do that. I claim that. But I think one of the bigger things is when someone's speaking to me in an aggressive manner and have a raised voice, that's when I shut down. That does it for me. And I didn't know that until I had that incident at work, where a manager was raising their voice at me, and he was raising his voice, and he was standing up, and I was sitting down. And so for me, it was like that person had power over me, and that person was being aggressive, and I really did. It was another coworker sitting there, and that coworker was like, I was waiting for you to say something, but I just shut down. And most people know I speak my mind, all of that. I'm a very, blunt person. I say what I mean what I say. But because he was standing over me and his voice was raised, it was like I was a child, and I couldn't say anything. And I just
Can you talk to Deandra a little bit more about when you went to to see someone to talk about how you felt when they raised your voice, and how did they teach you or to kind of cope with it or deal with it or react or respond in a healthy way?
Yes, well, one of the things is that is that we're only responsible though for ourselves. We can't control how somebody else does. But one of the things I did, I'm gonna go back to kind of even how she was able to go back and about my childhood. She asked me about my childhood. I told her about my childhood. You think you're talking, just telling what happened. And then she started asking other questions as far as relationships, with adults while I was a kid, just all of that. And so when I brought up the fact, because I wasn't going to, and like I said, because I'm private, I'm just so private. So even in that moment, I was trying to be private, like you're telling your business, but you're not telling everything. And I then started sharing with her about my childhood and the physical abuse part. And she was able to tell me, she said, that raised voice did something for you. So for me, it's just to take a time and count to 10 and actually breathe through it, because that's one of the things is that once it happens, I don't take time to breathe. I'm already just shut down. Like it's just a complete no cooling down. It's just a switch turned off. I just turn off. And so it was just a like count to 10 and just, even if you have to tell a person, hey, just give me a minute and take that minute to calm down so that then you can tell them how you feel, because I would be so upset. I can't even tell how I feel. I couldn't even respond at all whatsoever. It was a complete opposite to how I am. I normally speak my mind, but because of that behavior, I just shut off and I couldn't even respond, like literally couldn't respond. So it was to ask that person to give me a moment and then to take that time, because it was in a work setting. So because it was in a work setting, she felt more so that even though I felt like a hit was coming, that probably a hit wasn't coming because I was at work, and more than likely your manager is not going to strike you, So it's to ask for that moment, to say, I need a moment and then start breathing. And she gave me breathing techniques so that I could now start breathing, and then to be able to come back and to express to that person how I felt. If I felt like I couldn't do it in that moment, to then go back to my desk and then to send an email. Do not send the first email that you type up.
Wait, how many times did you go back and change the email?
I had to go back and change the email like 3 times, because then finally I sent the email to another coworker who I trusted. And then they were like, you can't say that, because, everything that I wanted to say in that moment was in that email. And so, I changed it and then sent the email, and the person never responded. They act like they never received the email, and I just moved from there. And really, it was one of those things where they opted to stay away from me, and I opted to stay away from them, and I mean, that's how we handled it. It wasn't the best way. It was avoidance on that person's side as well, because of whatever issues they had. So it was, a total avoidance, but I did send the email. So I felt like I did my part.
I think what you just said, Deandra, about you didn't send the first email right away, because I know for me, when things would like trigger me or something would happen, I was so impulsive. I mean, so
Promise used to send that first email.
I mean, so impulsive, and not just at work, but in my personal relationships. I mean, with y'all, like, I love you guys, because I mean, that's the with my the name, and we'll joke.
You know what they say, she didn't get to what's about some of that. She didn't care what you had to say.
No, that was like, oh, POMC done showed up. POMC's here.
and that's, I was just going to say that. So at work, for those of you who are listening in, we, at where we worked at, we went by our last names. So people at work would know me by Miss So-and-so. Well, internally, obviously in our office, we would go by our first names. And my name in Spanish is Promesa, but in English, it's Promise. So people would call me Promise. And, you know, I normally typically went by Promise. But when that other side came out, you know, I don't know if it's the Latina in me, the I'm gonna go off on you in me, you know, whatever it was, that's when DeAndre would be like, oh, Promesa about to come out, you know, and but being impulsive and having that within you because of things in your childhood or things that you're dealing with that you haven't really dealt with, I really truly have learned even now how not to be impulsive. And I can like sit back and just not even respond how I used to, not react how I used to. And, you know, that's the God in me. That's the healing in me. That's the process that you can look at a person and know, wow, they're truly not the same person. You know, I remember there were times when I'd be at the window talking to clients and they'd be acting a hot mess and I'd start rolling my neck and my eyeballs and all that stuff. And like one time, literally, I kid you not, it was like God said to me, you can't be acting like that anymore, girl. Like I literally I felt like he put like a neck brace on my neck and I couldn't be rolling my neck anymore. I couldn't be doing that to my friends, to my family, to my kids. You know, it was like that part of me was taking out, and I learned to love and I learned to be patient and be at peace in whatever situation I was going through, but not to be so impulsive. Even, you know, I love my sisters. There's 3 of us girls. We're so very different, but we would butt heads so much because we were all 3 so impulsive. And we've learned now, you know, as we're older, we love you. We're different. We have different personalities, but we've learned to respect each other's feelings and not be so impulsive. So that can just really cause a lot of things within relationships when you are that impulsive. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I try not to, because my first response is horrible. Like
we know.
My first
we know
response is horrible. So I'm just like, don't send it. Don't even do it. I try to even do that though in my personal life. Like even with my husband, I try not to just get to, if we're upset, I'm just gonna just shoot that angry text. I may take a minute, because you say stuff, you can't take it back. So I had to learn that the hard way.
And I was that one, I don't like to talk, period. So
Yeah.
too many words going back and forth, that's a waste of my time. Let's get to it. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn. And for me, it wasn't that went away. It was that I had built up more things to lose. So if I sit here and I act a fool and I do something that I might be going to jail, I won't have a professional license, I'm not going to have a job.
Yep.
I have to talk myself through like that, because I always felt like I was right. You ain't had no business saying to me what you like. It would be that kind of thing. So then now it's like a righteous indignation, and it's like, no, just chill out. It's okay. You don't have to go there, but it would be hard.
Can you talk a little bit more, Tara, about the need, or you know, in the therapy side of it, the need of why we have to have the last word, or why we feel like we have to be right? Where does that come from? Where does it stem from? What is the issue with that? Because I know a lot of us, we got to be right. We have to have the last word. Like, it doesn't matter. I want the last word and I'm right. That's it. Point blank, period.
Mm-hmm. And it comes from the fact that when someone is abusing you in any way, they take your power and control away. And a lot of times that's us trying to exert our control or to get it back. And that's what it's just something that happens. Like, I don't want to be out of control. And a lot of disorders come out of these types of abuses, like OCD. that comes out of it. That is like this, it shows up in a need to control your environment, you know? And the flip side of that, where you have like the hoarders, that's them controlling their environment. I know you guys have seen those shows where they got all that stuff and they need to get rid of stuff, and people can't talk them into it because it's more than just an item. It is them giving up parts of their control over their life, or what they, even though it looks completely and totally out of control. I know for me, another trigger is if I just feel browbeat. You know, that was one thing my grandmother used to do all the time. Just, it was one thing after another. I couldn't do anything right and all of that. If I feel like someone is doing that to me, that's when I'm gonna either explode or shut down. I don't have an in-between. I can't reason through it at that point. That is how that shows up. That is a huge trigger for me. So it's like, it was certain things at work, if you guys remember, if I felt that coming from any supervisor, they was gonna catch it. And I didn't send a couple of them running and crying because we just weren't gonna do that, you know? And I did not think that it was anything wrong with that behavior at the time, because I felt like, I'm getting you up off of me because you out of pocket. And they may have been out of pocket, but it wasn't an acceptable way for me to be. You know, so
Yes.
Just learning the balance between the two and being able to defend yourself in a way that's not that way. And for me, I'm good at taking on the fight. It won't be a physical fight anymore. It's a verbal fight.
And so, Tara, my question to you is, with you being a therapist, how much of that do you take your own advice when you're dealing with your own stuff? Or how much has that helped you get through your past?
So I think that many times, this is the weird part. So a lot of this work I did even prior to becoming a therapist. So I've been able to incorporate it into my practice, because things that I use in private or in my private practice are kind of, they're divine led. And then the school books happen to line up with it. So I used a lot of this stuff beforehand. So when I'm in treatment with people, I'll call myself a roadmap, because I'm showing you that it's possible to come out of these things. You don't have to stay where you are. And there's some things that I do that maybe other therapists wouldn't. I believe in self-disclosure. We talk a lot about things that I've gone through, because how will you know it works if I can't tell you how it worked?
Yes.
So I do use a lot of personal examples and things like that. And a lot of clinicians don't do that, but I just don't believe in that, because I will go back to the scripture where it says that they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. That's very important.
I think it's important too about being transparent, being real, keeping it real, but being transparent of the things that we have gone through, how we went through it and grew, learned from it, but healed also, the healing process, but just being transparent. And that's a lot of what I talk about too, as I'm teaching or whatever it is that I'm, helping, ministering to somebody or whatever it is that I'm discussing, whether it's with kids or, a teenager, a young adult, another female. To me, it's very important to be transparent, because for me, like, don't come at me and talk to me about something that I'm going through. If you really haven't been through it, if you haven't had to go through something like that, because how can you sit there and tell me this when you don't know what I'm feeling? You don't know what I've been through. You've read all these books and you have all these titles behind your name, but you ain't never gone through none of this. So I think it's important, and, I applaud you for that, because as a therapist, sometimes we go to therapy looking at this counselor feeling this big because we have all these issues, and we don't know that they've gone through or been through or are going through the same thing. So I think it's very important to be transparent.
Yes, that's one thing that I love that you've always done with your people is I know that you share your story. And I mean, if you think about it, why would a person, and I'm not saying that people won't respect people, but I think they have a little bit more respect for someone that has been through what they've been through and were able to move forward. And
Yes.
that's why I think that gives a person hope, you know. So
Yes.
I love
Amen.
how you do that. I love it. I've always loved that.
So guys, I know this has been a rough one. I didn't cry. It was close. I didn't cry though, but this has been a rough one. So I would encourage anyone, reach out to us. If you're in the Atlanta, Georgia area, I could take you on in my clinical practice if that's something that you would need, even if it's just for a consultation, just to talk about how to go forward. But in your area, feel free, reach out and get yourself some help. I hope that us being transparent and discussing our personal situations has helped someone. And I'm of this mind. If we've helped one person, then we've done what it is we needed to do. So
yes,
again, ask us questions, reach out. We want to hear from you. And again, thank you for coming in. We appreciate you just getting a look at us as our friendship, and we hope to add you as friends soon. So we'll talk soon, and thank you again for joining in.
We would just like to invite you in on our podcast where we're going to talk about some things. So get your tissues ready. It's going to be deep, but it's going to be real. So we invite you to just sit in with us and share our experiences, share your experiences with us, and we'll share ours with you.